Hey folks, happy Friday. Welcome back to the PagerDuty Twitch channel. It's Friday. It's time for some HowTo Happy Hour. And this week we're going to turn it over for process automation. Peco's back with us to tell us all about everything that came out this week.
Hey folks, good to be here. We did a quick introduction earlier in the week before, or actually at the time we were just launching everything. So now our documentation is available for you on the next generation architecture. We've recorded like some webinars if you're curious about the scenarios where the kind of this new architecture applies for managing remote environments. So, today I was thinking about just spending more time in product, kind of walking you through some of the setup, some of the features, and again, very, very informal, and hopefully the demo gods are with me today.
Excellent, excellent. All right, we'll get your screen up here and we'll be ready to go. There you go.
Awesome. So let me start with just, again, in case we have folks that haven't seen our introduction yet, I'll start with kind of what the technology is real quick, and I'll walk you through my notes of what I was planning to share with you in terms of the technology. So we released what we call a next generation architecture with our runners, where now the runners have a lot more capabilities to run local inside the environment. And that helps us solve several challenges. For example, in the previous, in the classic architecture, which is still available, it's still applicable for centralized environments. One of the challenges for managing many remote environments is managing connectivity into those environments, because a lot of the plugins and executors are local or centralized in the process automation server or runbook automation. You have to open up firewall hosts either for SSH or for the other remoting protocols that we wanted to use plugins for. With the new architecture now, the runners you can think of them as first-class citizen as part of the automation workflow, and they kind of help us delegate tasks into the remote environment. Whether it's wanting to run a Kubernetes command, or you wanted to directly interface with Docker, or Ansible, running Ansible playbooks. So that's the gist of next gen. We're finding that our customers already in the early adoption stage, they're finding a lot of different scenarios where this is helping them scale better, just manage automation more easily for a larger environment. And we're continuing to find new scenarios like managing, for example, managing data center resources, but when you have a cloud deployment. Where you deploy your process automation or runbook automation, you adopt a runbook automation, and then you can connect to these environments. Or maybe you have multi-cloud where you have some servers in GCP, some servers in EC2, and then you still need to kind of connect to those private networks and do automation inside.
Oh, sure.
And the last interesting scenario is like not just data center, but also the kind of the edge, right? If you have a remote office or branch or a store location that has some equipment that needs to be automated, again, this technology now makes it much easier to connect and manage many remote environments. So that's the gist of it. Let me just take a quick look at my notes. Yeah. So next, I was just going to walk you through how to kind of install this.
Yeah, awesome.
With a quick scenario, and then I'll show you how it's being used, and then we can take some questions, and then maybe cover some of the more advanced topics as well.
Cool.
So let's kind of dive in. So currently, I have my my runbook automation account, and again, we talk about runbook automation and process automation. So think of it as the Rundeck Enterprise version, and then the Rundeck Enterprise version running in the cloud that we manage. So those are the two products that support the new architecture. So let's start with the runners. Again, these are you can think of the runners again as satellites that will be running in the remote environments that then securely connect back to us. So let's create a new one. And again, you know, this is live demo, folks. You know,
fingers are crossed. Fingers
are crossed and toes are crossed. All right, let's call this. You can give it a description. All right, so kind of a new concept is the idea of a tag, and tags are actually very important. You know, tags are essentially the addressing mechanism for these remote runner satellites. So your tagging strategy may vary depending on the environment. You know, if you're managing certain type of application, you know, again, tags are flexible. You can add multiple of them. But for now, I'll just call this, you know, pitch demo. All right. And I can add more. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I can. Yeah, let's get fancy. We'll call this client Z. All right. So next, the next step in the kind of the setup is to link a runner to be associated with a certain project. So
okay.
The idea here is that, again, imagine you have a bigger fleet, multiple projects. You wanna know, you know, who is who in the zoo. So it's good to kind of set up the runner perimeter based on the projects that need to be associated versus just saying, you know, I want this to be connected to every single project. So from a security standpoint, it's good to be thoughtful again who you're gonna allow to connect and run, you know, jobs through that runner. All right. All right, that's it. So we created it. Now, next step is we need to actually drop it into the environment where it's going to run. So I'm going to download it. We're going to watch a little bit of paint dry here.
Okay.
For a few seconds, and I can explain kind of the gist here. So the runner is a jar. It's a jar package that we'll launch with. In our example, we'll launch with the Java runtime, and then we'll drop it in the background. It will run as a service. Now. Obviously, that's kind of a naughty thing to do in a real environment. So we have actually many different ways that you can, you know, run these runners and configure them. So the example I have here is, you know, you can install it as a systemd service. We're also shipping the runner as a container image. So you can, again, depending on your preference of managing, you know, running services, you can go the container route, you can go the Linux route, and actually very soon we'll publish also a Windows recipe.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
So again, all the flavors of operating systems are covered. All right. Paint is almost dry. So the previous, you know, just a little factoid, the previous version of the runner was about 40 megs. This one is about 60, because in this version we've added a lot of the, you know, plugin integrations, so that
and they all come down in the initial package. Then you don't have to go find them somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're already bundled. Again, just this quick 3-step process, you're ready. You know, you're off to the races.
Cool.
All right. So next, let me move this over. And another thing I was going to cover here, I'm doing these steps manually so you understand what's happening, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't mean you'll be doing this manually in a production environment. You know, obviously you have the, you know, the system or
oh you're getting kind of choppy, Peco. Oh no, what's going on here? Oh, I think we may have lost Peco. All that downloading there. Let's see if I take his share off, if that helps any. Oh no. Okay. Now we've got some movement there.
All right. Can you guys see me?
Now we're back. Okay. Yeah, now you're moving.
Back.
All right.
All right. You know, my kids are back home from school, and I'm sure they're like on their devices right now.
Of course. Yeah.
So, all right. Where were we?
You were just showing us where you were going to put the that thing.
Okay.
You're talking about doing it manually versus
Yeah,
you
so
have them somewhere else.
I'm showing you the manual process so you understand how the bits are moving. But in a production environment, obviously, you probably want to automate the entire runner creation. How we authenticate, how we download. So it's not. I'm showing you the manual steps for, again, simplicity, but you can actually, we've published runner management APIs now with this version. So anything from checking the status of a runner to downloading the executable, to actually regenerate credentials, everything is API based. So we have customers that are now fully automating that cycle of deployment and managing of the remote runners. All right. So I think this is done. So I'm on the box in my EC2 private network where I'm going to be running this. So I'm here, okay. I'll make a new directory where I want to run this. Call this Twitch runner. Okay. Let's see. All right, I'm going to drop it here. And now, to show you the magic, right? So after I finish the runner, it's going to show that it's offline, okay?
Oh, okay. All right.
I created it, but it's not running because I haven't started it yet.
So you kind of like made a slot for it, but it's not plugged into that yet.
So it essentially creates kind of the logical config, but until you install it, it's not going to connect and start. Start looking for workloads. So let me see on here. Okay. Java. I'm going to drop this in the background. So if I did everything correctly, now this little guy is going to wake up and it's going to connect to, start connecting and getting, getting signal back to the, centralized system.
Okay.
Huzzah! All right. So far, the demo gods are benevolent to me.
Very nice, very nice.
So, but I mean, in essence, it's using standard HTTPS communication. Again, I didn't have to poke firewall holes. It woke up. It has all the credentials that it needs and beams back now, and it's looking for work now.
Okay.
All right. So I think we covered kind of this quick setup, the different options. We talked about tagging. So, okay, now that you've essentially done the initial setup, what do you do next? By the way, actually, sorry, one thing I was going to mention is there are a couple of more advanced options here. If your environment, for example, is using proxy, HTTPS proxies. So in the docs, we have instructions on how you can configure the runners to communicate through proxies. Okay. Cool. And then the other item is if you again wanted to get more into troubleshooting the runner if something is not connecting properly, you can change the log levels. Again, that's also documented here. And again, the logs get created in the logs get created into the runner directory itself where we ran it. So if I look at the runner, you can see kind of it has its own internals there.
Okay. Yep.
It doesn't really take a lot of disk space, but it does keep some logs and kind of local persistence there. So if I look at the logs, I can look at the runner log. It tells me kind of what's happening behind the scenes. Again, this is useful if you need to troubleshoot, send something to support. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. We're up and running.
Cool.
All right, so now that we have the runners, well, okay, that's interesting. Now what do we do? Let's actually go and create some jobs.
Yeah.
So if you remember, when I created the run, I associated and linked it to this project. So now it's going to be visible. It's going to be accessible here.
Okay.
Actually, let me pause here. It's a good actually step to, if folks have any questions about the installation process or comms or kind of the internals, I'm happy to. This is a good place to answer that.
Yeah, nothing's come up in the chat yet. I did have one question. Like when you're setting up like just a singular Rundeck server, you're putting like authorization keys and stuff like that in the Rundeck server. Do you also need to put that stuff out on a box that's going to host a runner?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's actually, you can manage that. There are credentials that the runner uses to authenticate.
Okay.
Right. And the keys right now are bundled, but obviously in a production environment, you're probably going to override them and keep those keys in the key store. So something that we do support in the runner config. Let me see. It was on the installation. Is you can actually launch the runners with properties dynamically.
Okay.
So you don't necessarily need to store them on disk, but these are the the 4 tokens that direct where the runner should connect. What's the auth that it's going to use and so forth. So the idea is if you're scaling, probably going to keep these things into key stores and then provide them when you're launching the runner, either as a container or with the service. But it can be drawn with these environment variables.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, great question. And actually, one more question that nobody asked, which usually comes up, is like, well, how many of these things do I need? Can I run them? Can I run 5 of them on the same machine and so forth?
Oh,
so again, the small processes in the current setup, because I don't want to spend a lot of money on Amazon demo environments. I have several runners running in parallel here.
Okay. Are they then like all configured to talk to the same Rundeck server, but like different projects, or? Yeah,
they are. But you can also point them to different places. Again, the idea is that you have flexibility on how you deploy them. Again, for simplicity, I drop them here in the same machine. But depending on how your networks are set up, you can have 2 or 3 boxes with different sets of runners. Mm-hmm. And it's also worth mentioning here is that several runners that belong to the same runner sets and tags. Essentially, they start acting like a load balance pair.
Oh, okay.
So the idea is, if I queue one of them and a job is now using those tags, the other runner is going to start picking up the workload and executing those tasks. So again, with the new architecture, we built some explicit load balancing behavior in the runner setup.
Cool.
All right, back to the fun part if there are no questions. So now let's look at how do we actually use the runners. Okay, I've created a bunch of jobs here. Starting with the simplest thing is I wanted to do a HTTP check. So now, because the runners are part of the picture, so to speak, part of the workflow, we have options on how to configure where we want things to run. Do we want things to run on the server? Do we want things to run on the actual runner machine as a workflow step, or do we want to dispatch to node? So the example I have here is going to be fairly straightforward. Let me run it first. Okay, so now this is just a workflow step. Okay, it ran pretty quickly. So what does this do? It just does I'm using the HTTP plugin to just do a
get,
HTTP get on PagerDuty.com. So if you look at how this is configured, just to illustrate this, oops. All right, so this is probably very familiar to everybody. The difference now with the new architecture is that in addition to the workflow, workflow tab, now we have a nodes and runners. So this allows us to then select specifically where we want things to run. These workflow steps or job steps in general. So in my example, because I wanted to connect from my server where I have Rundeck running to PagerDuty, I'm basically doing that check, and I've picked the local runner. So the local runner represents the server, as it states here. Now, I could change this behavior and say, you know what? Why don't we run this from my runner that we just installed, the Twitch demo. So now I pick it, save it. And I can run it. So essentially what this will do is instead of running from the server now, the actual job will run from the Twitch runner that we installed.
So the Rundeck server has queued up the job for the runner grabs that job and runs it wherever it lives.
Exactly.
Okay.
Again, specifically when you say that you want to run that task on the runner, so you're picking the behavior. Do I want to run on the Rundeck server? Do I want to run on the runner? And the third option that I didn't cover yet is, the run is also, think of it as like a way to connect to the other nodes. So you can use it as a place of execution, but you can also use it as a, something that we're running and connecting to another machine. So in this case, I have 2 nodes, and I want to execute an HTTP check, but on the actual server. Okay, let me rephrase it. I'll run this on a node other than where the runner is running.
Okay.
So basically, the runner again picks up the task and then dispatches those sets of commands or plugin executions on the server.
And then the communication, the output that comes back from that execution comes back to the runner, and the runner passes it back to the Rundeck server?
Correct, exactly.
Okay.
So run this. In this case, I'm just running some, and it's using a different runner in this case, as you can see, because that's how I've configured this job.
Okay.
But this will run just a couple of commands on the, I think it's just doing a uname.
Yeah.
On that server 1 machine that I was routing to. So let me go back to edit just to see from an author experience what does it look like. All right, so in this case, again, I'm using a different tag, which again, you can think of tags as virtual IP addresses. It's what the it's what the new architecture is using to route jobs to the right runners. So in this case, I've said okay, I don't want you to run it there, just dispatch it, send it to the remote host, and run the commands there. Okay.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Yeah, again, you have a ton more flexibility on what you can do now. And yeah, I think we're just scratching the surface on the types of scenarios we can run with this distributed automation capability. One setting I was gonna share is there's also ways to dynamically change the nodes and the runners. So we've added this new flag. So if I select it, now this will at runtime show me an option to select which runners I want to pick. For example, and the scenario here is if I want to use the same job but in different environments, again, I can use the kind of the dynamic nodes with tags and the runners and change that.
Okay.
Where things get routed at runtime.
Yeah, so it's like, especially for, you can imagine for like geographic locations, like you might be running things at different times there.
Or it could be, again, like you said, it could be a different VPC on zone. It could be, it could be just you tag things based on clients, and the runners then can connect to those environments.
Okay.
All right. So one thing I'll point out, again, this is the new surface area in the UI. But when it comes down to dispatching to nodes, all the options are exactly the same as they were in previous versions. So again, no change here. But once you turn on the feature, you're gonna start, this runner set behavior is gonna be seen in the UI. If you, I guess, from when you're designing your workflows, I guess one thing is, if you turn this feature is like, well, am I ready to use it or not? You can toggle the feature on and off to change the behavior. So again, it's not a set it once and then, do a bunch of work. Again, you can, if you're not ready, if you just want to experiment, you can turn it on, experiment, and then turn it off.
Cool.
The default behavior, if you don't do anything, once you turn the feature, is that we're going to run on the local runner. And that's important because, again, all your workflows, they don't need to change if you're just doing local execution. They'll continue behaving the same way. All right, save this. So now if I run this job, notice that now there's a different option that allows me to change what I'm targeting.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Where I'm going through, right? I can say, you know what, target that node, but route this through the Twitch demo runner. So notice that, previously was called, I think, runner next gen, and now it's routing.
Yeah, back to the new one.
And cool. The cool thing that is kind of subtle, but in the previous generation, in a very limited way, like a lot of this behavior was assumed. So when you're designing or when you're running workflows, you actually start losing track of what's running where. And now we've added a lot of hints, a lot of things in the UI to tell you, okay, you're okay. Before I
think you're buffering again. Yeah, you're okay. There you go.
All right, sorry.
No worries.
Want to take a few minutes for questions or?
Yeah, I have just one. The one I was going to ask was like, if folks are looking at this, like, do they need to? So what's sort of the process or approach if I have a bunch of jobs already and I want to put some runners together? Should they re-architect the jobs that they already have to take advantage of the runners, or do you recommend like starting over with like copying jobs and enabling those for runners for folks who already have like an established set of jobs in their projects?
Yeah, so I think it's you have to think about how to use the feature. So what I'm saying here is like you can turn on the feature and if you're just using local execution, that's fine. Local execution works. But the moment you start thinking about, again, how do I distribute things and where things need to run, that's where you have to think about your workflows, because they're not just running in one place anymore, right? So my recommendation is if you have very, very big, complex workflows. Okay, sorry. If you have very big, complex workflows that now you need to start distributing, first is like think about the environment, how it's broken up, and tag it appropriately, and then start taking smaller parts of the workflows and kind of breaking them up and distributing them, and then once you have the smaller pieces, then put them together in a bigger workflow.
Okay.
And I actually have one example that is a little, has like more steps and things are running in different places, and I'll show you kind of what it looks like. But that's a great question. Yeah. So let me show you the more complex example. And again, this is not, I'm not saying that that's the best way to do it. I'm showing one way that you'll start having the ability to create more complex things.
Sure.
So let's actually look at how this is designed first. Okay, so I have a workflow. It's running some shell scripts or shell commands inline. And then, I have a step that's updating, PagerDuty.
Okay.
So now when you think about it, like in the previous life, everything is just running in the same box, right? Now, these different steps are potentially executing in different places, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's super cool, it's super awesome, but again, you have to think about, again, where things are going to run, right? So in this case, what I've decided is I want the PagerDuty update step, which is using a PagerDuty plugin in a reference job, to run locally. But I want everything else to run on the runner.
Oh.
Right. So now in 4 steps, I'm doing like, potentially I'm touching like 3 or 4 different environments, which is pretty cool. Right?
That is cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So are they sort of represented in order there? So the first one's like you're going to go out to the runner, run a thing, and it comes back and reports to the Rundeck server, and the Rundeck server goes and updates PagerDuty, and then the next 2 activity is run as well.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Oh, that's slick. Okay.
Yeah. And again, I think there's more complex scenarios on how how variables are being passed around. I don't have like a complete example here, but it's something we'll publish, soon as a reference, because it could get a little bit more complex on how you pass, context, variables, things like that.
Sure. Yeah.
But again, my mainline workflow is running on demo, and if I take a look at the actual reference job, that's configured to run locally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. And let me run this. And again, it's not. I haven't fully configured this yet, so you'll see what it does, but hopefully it illustrates the point. All right. So put a PD incident. All right, so now it will start running on next gen, because that's how it's selected. But now watch the other steps as they start unfolding. Sorry, my dog got trapped here.
Oh no, it's very sad to be on the wrong side of a door.
And she's so polite. She was just like, just faintly like. Okay, so it ran the first step.
Okay. Oh yeah, there you go.
Right. So server 1 is just it's doing from there it's pulling some EC2 status with local commands. All right. Now it did go into the next step, which is using the PagerDuty plugin, and because I don't have anybody listening on the other side, it's just going to give me an auth error. But this step actually ran locally on the server.
Okay, so it took what came back from what the runner did, munged all that data into the PagerDuty format to then provide it as additional information to some incident. So this is like an automated diagnostic sort of workflow.
Yeah, exactly.
That allows you to fan that out across. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And, I'll let it run, but it'll run the next set of steps, on the now back to the remote machines.
Okay, cool.
Right. So again, you can imagine. I think I like the word that you use is fanning out. Right? It's like now I can trigger something and either do a collection kind of more broadly or the trick is that these environments they don't share a network, right? They're running in different places. They could be running in Japan and Europe. They could be running in 10 different stores that you're managing.
Yeah.
So pretty cool.
That is super helpful. We have one question in the chat so far. Greggy1999 would like to know what happens when a runner loses connection with the central server if it's in the middle of a workflow or orchestration.
Yeah. So there is the connection status will get detected, and the remaining tasks will get picked up by another runner under the same tags. Now, it's a good question because there's different ways that a connection can get interrupted.
Yeah.
Right. it depends also on like if we have retries and things like that. So I think there's enough resilience for us to persevere, across a disconnected state, and also a failing runner. But I think one point is we haven't documented a lot of these scenarios yet, and I think that'll be a follow-up item.
Cool.
To make sure that we cover some of them more clearly. But again, the runner itself is also maintaining state.
Mm-hmm.
So if it disconnects, it drops, it still has a task list that it can fulfill, right? It's not, if for some reason it got shut down or somebody killed the process, it's not losing its work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, does it queue that up if it just lost connectivity? Does it then report back if it's then able to reconnect, or does that like require a restart and a whole other reset?
No, it will reconnect.
Okay.
Unless the process itself is halted for some reason, but if it's just a loss of connection, it will reconnect.
Okay, cool. That makes it more robust for sure.
And I think that's a great question. I think something that, like I said, we'll make sure that we cover more of these scenarios in the docs under the more advanced topics.
Yeah, cool.
I'll take a note. All right. I had another example here so far we've been doing simple stuff like HTTP checks, running command scripts. I had an example with where we're running Docker commands, through the runners. So I'll just run this. Again, this is, I have a remote Docker machine, and now that the plugins are available there, I can run the Docker plugins. So this would just give me stats of what's running. So I can grab the container ID. And now I can do another job that will do process listings like a diagnostics on that Docker setup. Oops, I should have run it. Actually, this should fail because I didn't provide the container ID. Or at least, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Here's the container ID. This should work. All right, finished. And again, what it did is it used the Docker running a command plugin, and then it also did a local on the runner HTTP check.
Oh, okay. Now I noticed when you click these jobs, it's doing like a little bit of like the success bar is a little bit more sophisticated. Like is it actually giving you like long-term estimates on like how long that job actually runs?
It does try based on previous jobs. It tries to like, just use simple measurement to see like, are you within range based on your previous executions or not? And that's how the status bar moves.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we covered the main ideas here. I guess, let me see, did I have anything else?
While you're looking there, we've got one more question in the chat here. It says, if I have many separate environments, it might be because of security and compliance requirements. How does this help me meet those requirements?
Yeah, I think, and up to this point, we've worked with a lot of different permutations of that question. But bottom line is, because you're establishing communication outbound from that private network and resource, you're not managing firewall rules or installing VPN tunnels and things like that. So because the local environment essentially controls the communication, It's in general deemed more secure, more in the zero trust best practice that is being recommended.
Now, when you're running things through the runner, does that show up in the audit log that Rundeck produces?
Actually, good question. That's something I need to check. I'm not 100% sure, but it obviously gets logged in terms of the actual execution, so you can see where things ran.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the runners locally in the environment maintain their logs as well. So you can always use that and put the runner logs into Splunk and kind of measure and monitor the activity there as well.
Yeah, cool.
But it's a good question. I think I'll need to check on that.
Interesting. All right. I had one more question. Is there any recommendations if you've got a mixed environment of Windows and Linux systems? Does it matter one way or the other if I've got my runners running on Windows or Linux or a combination of both? Do I need to separate things by family or anything like that when I'm looking at mixed environments?
I would say in general, yes. I would if you're on Windows, we use WinRM as a connectivity mechanism. So to the nodes, not to the runners. To the runners, it's still using the same, what I just showed you. So I would say, at least what I'm observing is, Windows teams prefer to keep things the Windows way, and Linux teams will prefer to keep them the Linux way. So that will naturally kind of separate how you divide the environment. But from the same job, can I do things across Windows and Linux? Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Smooth things out for everybody. Excellent. All right. Does anybody else out there have any questions? You still have a few folks watching out there. Thanks for joining us today on this one. If you scroll up in the chat, Joey has added some links for folks for the webinar, the recording from yesterday. If it's not up yet, it will be up shortly, and as well as the documentation from the other stuff from this week. So
there was kind of one last thing, because we ended up on compliance and security.
Oh, yeah.
That I'll mention, which now we've added another way to control where certain plugins are running.
Ooh.
So we have this allow list that will tell, basically you can configure your environment to say, I want these types of plugins to only run on runners remotely. And the reason we do that is when you have a shared environment, we've heard from customers that, hey, I don't want anybody randomly running script commands on the central, Rundeck system, or Docker commands, So in a way, this helps customers that are getting more into multi-tenancy manage execution that way. That way, if I say that a plugin is on this list, it means that you cannot select the local runner and all of a sudden, restart the Rundeck server.
Cool. That seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
Sweet.
All our great ideas are coming from customers. So this was this was an interesting scenario, and frankly, we needed also to implement similar behaviors for our SaaS. So we looked for a general solution that can apply to both the process automation on premise and Rundeck automation.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely a different kind of environment. And speaking of that, another question in the chat for shared environment. You mean all my fellow employees are sharing the same environment?
I'm trying to understand the question. Is that a question? Is it possible? Is it desirable? Or
yeah, Gregory, if you have any clarification there, what exactly you're after on that? I'm not sure I understand either. Who's sharing which part of it? So who's sharing the environment, but like which part of the environment? So like your Rundeck server, you have all kinds of folks on there, right?
Yeah. So when you have a bigger environment to manage as a central automation team, basically you tend to divide things into projects and then manage those projects with access control lists.
Yeah.
And because the runners are attached to projects, they will be contained, for that project.
So they'll then inherit. So like somebody can't just randomly be in another project and select someone else's runner across environments like
correct.
that.
And that actually is another layer of security, because now you have a runner that needs to be present, authenticated. You're not just like trying to manage all this complexity in firewall rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, Mandy, this is always exciting, and
this is great.
One thing I'll say to finish on, we just introduced technology. This is a direction. We'll continue adding more features and capabilities around. Again, runners like operating in the local environments.
Yeah.
So just look out for Mr. Jake coming in and doing another WOW session, in a few months.
Absolutely. We'll have Jake and Forth back on for more release notes, if nothing else, and we'll try and get them to do demos every single time so you can see as things progress and improve and we get more use cases fleshed out for all of these things. It'd be super interesting. So,
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Peco, thank you so much for walking us through all the deep details on this. I hope folks are excited to get started with this. We want to hear from you. If you're out there and you're going to experiment with this, drop us a message in the community forums, or you can drop us an email, community-team@pagerduty.com. We'd love to hear how you're using it, what you thought of it, what you're going to try and do with it, so that we can pass that back to the team and make this a great product for everybody. So, all right. I think that's good for us today.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday.
Have a great weekend.
We'll wish everyone an uneventful weekend. We'll be back next week with more content on the stream. In the meantime, you can catch us on the community forums or on ops.io/PD community. And we'll talk to everybody next week. So thanks a lot. Thanks for watching. Make sure you never miss a stream. Follow us at PD Community and PagerDuty on twitch.tv. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you'd like to be on our stream, email us at community-team@pagerduty.com so we can feature the cool things you're doing. And don't forget, check out all of our global events on our calendar at pagerduty.com/events.